It's June 12th, 1962. Dawn is just breaking over San Francisco Bay. A guard at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary makes his morning rounds through B Block. He shines his flashlight into cell 138. Something's off. The shape under the blanket doesn't move. He reaches in, touches the head on the pillow, and it rolls away. It's not a man. It's a dummy, made from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair. The bed is empty. The wall behind it has a hole, neatly hidden until now. 3 men are gone, vanished from the most escape-proof prison in America. Alcatraz. They called it the Rock, a fortress on a barren island, surrounded by freezing water, treacherous currents, and a 1.5-mile swim to shore that no one had ever survived. 34 inmates had tried to escape before. All were caught or drowned. Until that morning. The mastermind was Frank Morris, a bank robber with an IQ of 133, a guy who'd broken out of jails before and always got caught again. With him were brothers John and Clarence Anglin, tough, street-smart kids from the South who'd robbed banks without ever firing a shot. They weren't monsters. They were just men who refused to rot behind bars for the rest of their lives. They'd spent over a year planning this, digging tunnels with spoons, building fake heads to fool the guards, crafting a raft out of raincoats, all inside a prison designed to crush hope. But here's the question that still haunts everyone who knows this story. Did they make it? Did 3 ordinary criminals outsmart the entire US government and disappear forever? Or did the Bay claim them that night? To understand how they even dreamed this impossible dream, we have to go back to who these guys really were and how Alcatraz pushed them to pull off the greatest escape in American history. Let's rewind to where it all started. These weren't cartoon villains. They were products of hard-knock America. Guys who learned early that the system doesn't always deal you a fair hand. Frank Morris was born in 1926. Orphaned young, bounced around foster homes and reform schools. By age 13, he was already in trouble. Petty theft, car stealing, the usual spiral for a kid with no safety net. But Frank was different. Tests showed an IQ of 133, genius level. He could have been an engineer, a scientist. Instead, he became a master burglar and bank robber, pulling jobs clean and smart. He'd escaped prisons before, Louisiana State Pen even. Always got recaptured, though. Freedom was his drug. He once said, "I'd rather die trying than live in a cage." That stubborn streak, it was forged in those early years of scraping by. Then there were the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, born in Georgia during the Depression. Part of a big family of migrant workers, picking cherries up and down the East Coast season after season. No money, no stability. But those summers swimming in lakes and rivers made them strong as hell in the water. They turned to crime together, robbing banks in the 50s, always nonviolent, using toy guns or just threats. "We never wanted to hurt anybody," Clarence later claimed. They got caught after a string of hits, sentenced heavy. Like Frank, they were lifers who refused to accept it. These 3 ended up in Alcatraz because they were escape risks, guys who wouldn't stay put. Morris for his breakout history, the Anglins for trying to swim away from another prison. Alcatraz was supposed to break them, crush that defiance. But adversity like that, it sharpens you, turns survival instincts into something dangerous. Grit built in poverty, skills honed on the wrong side of the law, it all added up to men who could dream the impossible. And when they got transferred to the Rock in the early 60s, sharing the same cell block, something clicked. They started talking, planning, because giving up wasn't in their blood. That's when the real scheme began to take shape. By early 1961, Frank Morris had been on Alcatraz for about a year. The Anglin brothers arrived shortly after, transferred from other federal pens for being escape risks. And then there was Alan West, already in B Block, a career criminal with a knack for tinkering. Fate, or the Bureau of Prisons, put all 4 in adjacent cells along the same corridor. They started talking through the bars at night, low voices, sharing stories of past breakouts. Morris, the sharpest of them, laid it out first. Alcatraz wasn't unbreakable. It was just a puzzle waiting for the right minds. The spark came from something simple. Each cell had a small ventilation grate in the back wall, about 6 by 10 inches, leading to a narrow utility corridor nobody guarded at night. The concrete around those grates was old, crumbly from years of salt air. Morris tested it one night with a stolen cafeteria spoon. It chipped away easy. That was the entry point. From there, the plan took shape fast. They'd widen the vents, crawl into the unguarded utility space, then climb up through a vent shaft to the roof. From the roof, they'd slide down a vent pipe on the north end, hit the shoreline, and get off the island on a raft. Simple on paper, insane in reality. They turned the prison against itself. Spoons sharpened on the concrete floor became digging tools. A broken vacuum cleaner motor from the prison workshop got smuggled in pieces and rebuilt into a makeshift drill. Every night, one of them played accordion during music hour, loud enough to cover the scraping and drilling sounds echoing through the vents. Guards never caught on. Music hour was sacred. They collected raincoats, over 50 of them, traded or stolen from other inmates who used them for outdoor work details. Those rubberized coats would be glued together with homemade vulcanizing glue, heated over light bulbs to make a raft and life vests. Up on the hidden workshop they built on top of the cell block, access through the roof vents, they tested inflation, patched leaks, and practiced folding the whole thing small enough to carry. For over a year they dug, inch by inch. The holes grew from 6 inches to big enough for a man to squeeze through. They hid the progress with fake vent covers made from painted cardboard that matched the wall perfectly. Dirt and concrete dust got flushed down toilets or scattered in the yard. No one noticed. These quiet wins stacked up. No guard ever suspected. No searches turned up tools. The workshop stayed secret. They were pulling off the impossible right under the noses of the most watchful staff in the system. Preparation like that, it turns long shots into real chances. Resourcefulness beats brute force every time. But every night they worked, the stakes got higher. One loud scrape, one dropped tool, one suspicious guard, and it was all over. Solitary, or worse. Still, by spring 1962, everything was ready. The holes were wide enough. The raft was built. The dummy heads, crafted from soap, plaster, and real hair clipped from the prison barber shop, looked eerily real under a blanket. They set the date, June 11, 1962. Weather reports smuggled in from the library said fog would be thick, currents manageable. They were as ready as they'd ever be. One shot at freedom or death in the bay. The night came faster than any of them expected. Digging wasn't glamorous. It was brutal, slow, and terrifying. Every night after lights out at 9:30, they'd wait for the guards' footsteps to fade. Then the work began. One guy on accordion duty, blasting away to mask the noise, the others scraping, drilling, chipping at that salty concrete with nothing but sharpened spoons and a jury-rigged motor that whined like a dying mosquito. Progress was agonizing. Some nights they'd gain 2 inches. Others barely half an inch before the concrete fought back harder. Dust piled up, gray powder everywhere. They flushed it down toilets in small handfuls, praying no guard noticed the plumbing acting weird. One slip, one clog, and the whole plan collapses. Then came the close calls. Real heart stoppers. One night in late 1961, Morris is drilling when the bit snaps through too fast. A chunk of wall crashes down in the utility corridor. The clang echoes like a gunshot. Footsteps thunder from the guard station. Everyone freezes. The accordion player keeps going, louder, pretending it's just a jam session. The guard shines his light down the block, pauses, then moves on. They didn't breathe for 10 minutes. Another time, a routine cell search. Guards tossing bunks, checking walls. One officer taps the fake vent cover in Clarence Anglin's cell. It holds, but barely. The cardboard flexes just a hair. The guard frowns, taps again, then shrugs and walks away, inches from disaster. Alan West hit the biggest snag. His wall was thicker, the concrete denser. He fell behind, weeks behind. The others pushed him, smuggled extra tools, but tension built. Whispers through the vents. "You gotta catch up, man. We're not waiting forever." They adapted every time. When noise became an issue, they timed digs to the loudest accordion tunes. When tools dulled, they sharpened them on the yard's concrete during exercise hour. Casual as hell. When dust threatened to give them away, They started mixing it with hair clippings from the barbershop and scattering it like nothing. Resourcefulness under fire. That's what kept them alive in there. Quick thinking turns near busts into nothing. By May 1962, the holes were man-sized. The raft was sealed tight, tested in secret. The dummy heads, eerie perfection, painted flesh tones, real hair glued on, eyes that stared back at you. They'd beaten the odds so far. No one suspected a thing. The prison hummed along like always. But pulling this off meant everything was now on the line. One final push. One night to risk it all in that freezing bay. June 11th was circled in their minds. Fog rolling in thick. Currents just right. They were committed. No turning back. And that's when the real pressure hit. Because plans look perfect on paper until you have to live them. June 11th, 1962. The fog was rolling in thick, just like they'd hoped. Inside B block, the 4 men were wired tight. No more digging. Everything else was ready, or supposed to be. First, the dummy heads. They'd saved the hardest for last. Up in that hidden workshop on top of the cell block, Morris and the Anglins worked late nights molding plaster from the prison art room, mixing it with soap shavings for weight. Toilet paper layered on top, shaped into faces. Paint stolen from maintenance. Flesh tones, careful strokes for cheeks, lips, even eyebrows. The killer detail, real human hair, snipped from the barbershop floor and glued strand by strand. Under a blanket in dim light, those heads looked alive, breathing slow, waiting for morning count. They tested them in place one night. Guard walks by, flashlight beam sweeps the cells, pauses on John Anglin's bunk, lingers, then moves on. No alarm, it worked, but every test ramped up the paranoia. What if a guard touched one? What if the paint smudged from sweat? The raft was next-level ingenuity and risk. Over 50 raincoats, glued edge to edge with contact cement heated over stolen light bulbs. They built a 6 by 14 foot inflatable, complete with paddle blades carved from scrap wood. Life vests from sleeves. They inflated it partially up there on the roof space, listening for leaks, patching with more glue. One night, a seam bursts, hiss loud enough to wake the dead. They clamp it fast, hearts pounding, waiting for boots on the stairs. Nothing. But close calls like that were piling up, nerves fraying. Alan West was the crack in the plan. His hole still wasn't wide enough. The concrete in his cell fought harder. Thicker rebar, denser mix. He'd fallen weeks behind. The others smuggled him tools, extra spoons, even drill bits. Whispered encouragement through vents. "Dig harder, man. We're going tonight." West promised he'd catch up, but doubt crept in. Could they trust him to make it? Leave him and risk him talking? The group dynamic shifted. Quiet arguments, tension thick as the fog outside. Success so far had made them bold. Maybe too bold. They started taking bigger chances. Moving tools in daylight hours, skipping cover noises, hubris whispering, "We're untouchable. We've beaten this place." But Alcatraz wasn't done fighting back. Random searches intensified that spring, guards sniffing around B block more than usual. One officer lingered near the utility corridor entrance, flashlight probing. The men held their breath for days after. Everything converged on that one night. Weather perfect, guards predictable, dummies ready, raft folded and waiting. They made the call. Go time around 10 p.m. after final count. Squeeze through the holes one by one. Meet on the roof, down the pipe to the water. West begged for more time. The others couldn't wait. Freedom or bust. As lights out hit and the prison went dark, the real gamble started. No more practice runs. This was it. Life, death, or legend. And in the end, not everyone made it out of those cells. June 11th, 1962. Lights out at 9:30 p.m. The prison goes quiet except for the distant foghorn out in the bay. Inside B block, 3 men wait in the dark. Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin. Hearts hammering. This is it. They move fast but silent. First, the dummy heads. Each guy slides one under the blanket, positions it just right on the pillow. Hair tousled like they'd been sleeping. Pulls the sheet up to the chin. From the corridor, in the dim nightlights, they look real, breathing, alive. Then the squeeze. Morris goes first. He strips to minimize bulk, greases his body with some kind of lotion smuggled from the prison hospital. Feet first into the hole he'd spent a year carving. Shoulders scrape concrete. Pain shoots through him as he forces through, 6 inches at a time, exhaling to shrink his chest. Dust in his lungs. One wrong twist and he's stuck forever. But he pops out the other side into the utility corridor. Free for now. John and Clarence follow. Same torture. Grunts muffled, skin torn on rough edges. But they make it. All 3 in the hidden space behind the cells. Alan West? He's struggling. His hole, still too narrow after all those delays. He chips frantically with a spoon, concrete crumbling slow. Whispers through the vent. Guys, wait up. Almost there. But time's burning. Guards could patrol any minute. The fog outside is perfect cover, but it won't last forever. Morris makes the call. No waiting. They can't risk it. West is on his own. The 3 climb the vent shaft, 50 feet straight up, using pipes as handholds, bodies aching from the squeeze. They reach the roof. Cold night air hits them, San Francisco lights twinkling in the distance, 1.5 miles away. Freedom looks close. They grab the pre-stashed gear, the folded raft, paddles, life vests, all made from those raincoats. Slide down a bakery smokestack pipe on the north end, greased for speed. Hit the ground near the water's edge. Waves crash against the rocks. Water's black and icy, maybe 50 degrees. They inflate the raft quick, mouths and hands pumping air. Push it into the surf. Climb on. Paddles dig in. The current grabs them fast, pulling north toward the Golden Gate. Fog swallows them whole. No lights, no noise but waves and heavy breathing. Sharks? Currents strong enough to drag them out to sea? Hypothermia setting in already. Every stroke a fight. Time stretches. Minutes feel like hours. They aim for Angel Island or the mainland. Whatever land hits first. Back in the prison, West finally breaks through. Too late. The others are gone. He panics, crawls back into his cell, puts his own dummy head in place. But dawn's coming. The 3 in the bay? They vanish into the night. No screams, no signals. Just gone. Defiance like that, it demands everything. Body, mind, luck. One shot at beating the unbeatable. By morning, the guards would find the empty beds, the holes, the dummies. But that night, in the freezing water, 3 men chased the impossible and paid whatever price it took. When the sun rose and the alarm finally sounded, the real aftermath began. June 12, 1962, morning count in B block. A guard approaches cell 138, Frank Morris's. He calls out. No response. Flashlight beam hits the bunk. The head on the pillow looks wrong. He grabs it. Cold. Painted plaster and soap. Hair glued on. The wall behind has a gaping hole. Alarm blares across the island. 3 cells empty. Dummies in place. Tools scattered. The escape is out. Chaos erupts. Sirens. Dogs barking. Helicopters thumping overhead. Coast Guard boats swarm the bay. FBI floods in. Hundreds of agents combing shores, dragging the water. They find clues fast. A homemade paddle on the beach. Bits of the Raincoat raft washed up on Angel Island. A sealed packet with personal letters and photos floating nearby. Life vests too, but no bodies, no sign of the men. Alan West, left behind when his hole wouldn't give, cracks quick. He confesses everything. Leads investigators through the tunnels, up to the roof workshop, down to the water's edge. Recreates every step. In exchange, a lighter sentence. But the 3 who made it? Gone. The official story from the FBI. They drowned. That bay's brutal. 50-degree water, riptides pulling out to sea. Hypothermia hits in minutes. No way 3 guys on a flimsy raft swim 1.5 miles against that. Case closed after 17 years of hunting. No arrests, no sightings confirmed, just remnants in the water. Defiance pushed to the limit. It extracts a heavy toll. Ingenuity can crack the unbreakable, but nature often wins the final round. Freedom's price isn't always paid in years behind bars. Alcatraz shut down for good the next year. Costs too high. Security myths shattered. The Rock wasn't invincible after all. But the real fallout? Questions that never die. Did they beat the odds? Wash up somewhere and vanish into new lives? Even decades later, the Bay keeps its secrets, and their story refuses to fade. 60 years later, the Alcatraz escape is still the one that got away. No bodies ever found. No confirmed sightings turned up in all those FBI manhunts. Officially, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers drowned that night, swept out to sea by currents too strong for any man, even on a raft. Case closed in 1979. But closed doesn't mean settled. Every few years, something stirs the pot. In 2013, a letter shows up at the San Francisco Police Department, handwritten claiming to be from John Anglin. My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Offers to turn himself in for medical care. FB, I tested it. Handwriting inconclusive. No arrest followed. Then there's the photo. A grainy shot taken in Brazil around 1975. Two men working on a farm, faces weathered but bearing a striking resemblance to John and Clarence, aged up. Family members swear it's them. Experts argue both sides. Never proven, never debunked. Relatives of the Anglins still get occasional tips. Strange calls, vague postcards from South America. Enough to keep hope flickering. Enough to keep investigators wondering. The escape shattered Alcatraz's myth. Less than a year later, in March 1963, the prison shut down for good. Too expensive, too damaged by salt air, and now proven escapable. The Rock wasn't unbreakable after all. Today, tourists flock to the island, walking those same cells, peering at the dummy heads still on display, tracing the holes in the walls. Hollywood turned it into legend. Clint Eastwood staring down the bay in Escape from Alcatraz. Books, documentaries, podcasts, they all circle back to the same question. Did they make it? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Either way, three men with nothing but spoons, raincoats, and raw determination proved one thing. No system, no matter how ironclad, can fully cage the human drive to be free. That's the real legacy. Not whether they lived or died, but that they dared to try. If this story hooked you, the planning, the tension, the mystery, hit that like button, drop a comment below telling me what you think really happened, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What escape, heist, or true crime legend do you want me to break down next? Let me know. Who's the next outlaw or mastermind we should chase? See you in the comments.